A lot of people think playing against Teferi is pretty obnoxious, but imagine being married to the guy. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here for another one of my spoil lore videos where we take a look at a brand new card from Core 2021. By the way, I am loving this set so much. Dude, there's so much cool stuff in this set. So, anyhow, we have today a side character from Magic 2021, Teferi's wife, Sabirah. You will see on the screen Subira, Tulsi, Caravaneer. The reason this card looks a little weird right now on the screen is because I've had to slap English translations on top of the card because this wasn't spoiled in English. But I really want to talk about this card today because it's awesome when a random side character from Magic the Gathering finally gets a card. And it seems like what they're doing with this set that I really approve of is they're making a bunch of cards around Teferi. The cards that had basically like anything to kind of tangentially connect them, you know what I mean? Like Sabirah is a more direct connection because this is literally the woman who becomes Teferi's wife. Whereas some of the other ones we're looking at, Mangara, Jolrael, Karavik, those individuals were all more tangentially connected to Teferi. But either way, there is a level of connection throughout all these different legendary creatures that we're seeing. And I think that's pretty dope. So let's take a look overall at what the card does first. And then we'll dive into the story about how Teferi met and married Sabirah. All right? So, Sabirah, the Tulsi Caravaneer, is a 1 red and 2/2/3 legendary human shaman. I will admit right now, I don't know why she's considered a shaman. I saw nothing anywhere to indicate she has any magical powers whatsoever, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have them, so whatever. It's a minor sort of thing, but I did want to note that. So, 3 mana for a 2/3 with haste, pay 1 colorless, add another creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn, 1 red and 1 and tap, discard your hand. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. It's interesting to note that multiple colors are getting kind of weird ways to draw cards. I mean, discarding to draw is something that's normally red. So discarding your hand for the ability to draw cards, that totally feels like a red ability. But the doing damage with creatures to draw cards, that feels mostly like a blue ability with a tiny little green subset ability. You know what I mean? Secondarily in green. So it's interesting to note that this is on a red card, right? And it's also interesting to note that Teferi is blue aligned and Sabirah is red aligned. So it's kind of funky how they're from like opposites attract style scenario. I like that. That's a cool little funky scenario. So overall, the card feels like it could be pretty decent. You know what I mean? You can use her the turn she comes into play. You can swing, you can make your creatures, depending on how much mana you have, you can make your creatures unblockable. And on top of that, get to go ahead and draw a bunch of cards off it. So, I mean, I don't know if this is aggressive enough to fit into a mono red rush deck or not, but it certainly seems like it has the potential. And when we take a look at the artwork, you can see Sabirah here in front of her caravan. As far as I understand, it wasn't 100% clear, but it seems very, very likely that Sabirah is in charge of her own entire caravan. And a caravan is like a collection of beasts used to transport goods. The whole point is that you transport goods around, and in some cases people as well. Generally, the idea behind a caravan is you have a bunch of beasts and guards and people so that you can move a bunch of goods from city to city and trade and generate revenue, and people will pay for passage along with caravans as well. You know, like people will pay for passage along with caravans for the safety of being part of the caravan, and there will be kind of clingers on who aren't technically part of a caravan that will just sort of stay near it for safety, these kind of scenarios. Caravans tend to draw on all different types. So the story of Teferi meeting his wife Sabirah, this whole thing basically happens in the time frame after Teferi is no longer a planeswalker, all right? Because, and this is gonna sound weird, right? Because you're like, well, Teferi is a planeswalker. There was a period where Teferi did not have his planeswalker spark. He gave up his planeswalker spark to seal the time rifts. A bunch of different planeswalkers made sacrifices. Teferi was one of them. He lost his planeswalker spark, but managed to keep his life. The result of losing his spark was to help smooth out all the time problems that were happening in the multiverse. That stuff actually ties into the lore videos that I'm doing right now on Karn and Joyer and whatever. So if you're interested in the origins of the time fluctuation problems that happen in Magic the Gathering, that's a great place to learn more about that. So Teferi has given up his spark, and he is residing on Dominaria near his homeland of Zhalfir. But Zhalfir is out of phase with reality. So Zhalfir hasn't been destroyed, but it is permanently out of phase with reality. Essentially lost in time and never to be in synchronicity with reality. Never to return. Not destroyed, but unreachable, unattainable. And Teferi spends his days kind of ruminating over the fact that you can actually, if there's certain places you can go to where you can roughly make out kind of the outline of Zhalfir and where it was. So it's not like there's absolutely no signs of its existence, and this stuff haunts Teferi because without his Planeswalker spark, there's literally no way for him to restore the world. So, it's not the whole world, but to him, Zhalfir may as well be, right? So Teferi is roaming around. Now, he's using his own name, but people think that he is just a scholar with an unfortunate name because Teferi's name is reviled in this part of the world. He's considered the destroyer of Zhalfir. So when he tells people his name, they go, oh, that's a rough name. And he's like, I know. You know what? Nobody wanted to argue with my great-grandmother, and she insisted I be named this. Like, he had a well-practiced story that he would use, and he wandered around in a very lonely existence. Until abruptly, one day, a woman and a man come stalking up to him. These two individuals would turn out to be Subira and Kwende. They had been hunting for Teferi. They were trying to track him down. And the reason that they were trying to track him down is they were looking for someone by the name of MacLeod, all right? So Teferi's first thought when they came up was he was taken in by how beautiful and confident Sabirah was. This is like, oh, check her out. She's looking good. So they come up and they're looking for somebody who goes by the name of MacLeod. And this person named MacLeod was looking for Teferi. Now, Teferi has no idea who MacLeod is. Because, sorry, I literally have no concept of what you're talking about. But Subira and Kwende aren't willing to just take his word at it and just be like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to leave then. Because the thing is, MacLeod has been destroyed by sorcery. I guess destroyed is a strong term. He's now in a kind of what seems like a stasis. There are no signs of life. His body is rigid and cold. And it essentially looks like it's chrono magic. Now, the reason that Sabirah is here looking for Teferi is because whenever something like this happens, the town magistrates, because the caravan obviously is at the town where Teferi is, that's where all this has taken place, right? So at this point, Sabirah is concerned because the magistrates of the town do not look kindly on caravanners and see them as an easy scapegoat whenever something goes wrong in town. So clearly, a body hitting the floor in town is going to be a real issue for the magistrates. So Sabirah wants to get answers and get this solved before her and her people. She's essentially looking out for her people because she's got a good heart. So she's looking out for them, and she says, we've got to get to the bottom of this so the magistrates don't scapegoat us, right? Now, Teferi is like, look, are you sure? Are you sure this is like time magic or whatever's going on here? And they respond that it's been 2 days since this happened. There's literally no rot. He's not breathing. He's cold as a stone. And so Teferi, he's playing himself off as a scholar. He refuses to acknowledge if he's a mage or not. So he asks questions going, hey, I'm just asking this stuff because I'm a scholar. I just want to learn more about what's going on. And Sabirah was skeptical at that point. She did not believe that Teferi was a scholar. So basically, Teferi realized that he was already feeling a pretty strong attraction to Sabirah, right? So he agrees, on top of the fact that his name has been roped into it. Like, he's going along with this originally because he's trying to figure out, okay, why is my name coming into this? Maquette was set out specifically looking for Teferi, right? That's why he was with the caravan. He was going to go and find Teferi. So Teferi agrees to go and see if he can help figure anything out with them. They take him to where the body's located. Now, it's located away from the main encampment of the caravan for obvious reasons, under guard. And Teferi actually explains that what they've done is wise because there are actually some death magics that exist that are intended to be spread by people touching individuals who've been afflicted by the magic. So when Teferi lays eyes on Maquette, he's like, I've never seen this guy before in my life. I have absolutely no idea who it is, but it's also obvious to him with he may not be a planeswalker anymore, but he still has very powerful magic. So it's obvious to him that it's an unnatural end and magic was involved, but that it mimics time magic because time magic would have kept him alive in stasis. So this situation, Maquette's not alive, but time magic would have kept him alive and also would have required constant maintenance. So you would have to keep feeding magic into that to keep that sort of temporal situation going. So this couldn't be time magic. Now, basically, at that point, Sabirah just decides to do the whole like police trick of just confront them directly. Did you do this? And Teferi's like, no, this wasn't me. And then asks about the belongings of basically like, can I see the belongings, or actually more importantly, have you already searched the belongings of Maquette? And Sabirah admits that no, she was actually so certain that Teferi was the one who had did this, that she basically had already made up her mind. So they didn't bother looking for other clues because they thought they already knew who was responsible for it. So basically, Subira thinks that Maquette was sent to take out Teferi. But she also suspects that this scholar going under the name of Teferi is actually the real Teferi. And on top of that, she remains unfazed by that. Imagine the strength in like the inner character that it would take to be like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure this is actually the dude who's lived for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, is responsible for what happened to Zhalfir, like all of this sort of stuff, right? And she remains unruffled. It doesn't change her disposition towards Teferi, which admittedly is pretty impressive to me. So what happens though is her family were caravanners. So for her, a lot of people who live in this area, their families were trapped in Zhalfir. So all of their like previous generations have been, in their mind, wiped out because they view it as if Teferi destroyed the island. But her family is caravanners, so first of all, they weren't even in Zhalfir. They're always on the road, kind of nomadic people. So her family wasn't affected in that way. On top of that, Sabirah actually had some education, and as a result, she had read the histories of when Phyrexia invaded, and she actually understands why Teferi did what he did. She understands why he used the magic trying to protect Zhalfir, and she can also appreciate how stressful it must be for Teferi now that he knows Zhalfir is there just out of reach, and the power to be able to fix it is gone from him. There's nothing he can do. So she sympathizes with this. Now Teferi comes clean and admits that yes, that I am that Teferi, and that basically he went through. He was talking a little bit about the difficulties of it, because you have to understand that Teferi is wandering around reviled by everybody, pretending not to be himself. And he's relieved to finally have somebody who can understand the scenario. You can understand why he did what he did and has sympathy for the fact that he can't undo the magics. So that helped to strengthen the bond between them as well. So it basically comes around that maybe after investigating, maybe what happened was Maquette was actually trying to warn Teferi. That is what Sabirah's theory is. That instead of Maquette being the one who was trying to get to Teferi, MacLeod was trying to reach Teferi to warn Teferi about the real threat. And that wizard or whoever it was silenced MacLeod and tried to frame Teferi by saying, oh, it's time magic, or making it appear to be time magic, right? At this point, a whole bunch of voices start clamoring outside of the tent, and Sabirah and Teferi rush outside to see what's going on, to see a massive sandstorm barreling down towards their encampment. Now, this is not a normal phenomenon for this area. This isn't something they normally deal with. So basically all of the farms in the area, all the crops, all the livestock, they're all outside the city. The sandstorm most likely isn't going to affect the city that they're at, but it's going to completely wipe out the caravan and all the food supplies and things that the city relies on. So basically, Teferi realizes this whole scenario, what's going on. He realizes it's just going to be, it's going to be chaos and ruin for everyone involved. Now, Sabirah's just turning to Teferi, hopefully going, please tell me this is an illusion. And Teferi says, nope, this is absolutely real. Now, basically, he breaks it down. There's two possibilities. Either a powerful mage could conjure this up instantaneously, or a lesser mage could spend days manipulating weather patterns and other things subtly to achieve the same end effect. He doesn't know which. She asks if he has the magic, can you freeze this sandstorm with time magic? But unfortunately for Teferi, because it's tons of little individual specks, grains of sand, it's too many objects, it's too much for him to deal with. Remember, he doesn't have his planeswalker power anymore. So he says, no, but I do have something that may work. And he creates essentially a time bubble just filled with air. And he stretches it out into this massive, essentially almost like a wall of air that it functions somewhat as a windbreak. Now, this took a tremendous amount of energy from Teferi. So he stood there holding it for as long as he could, but it wasn't that long before he collapsed. Luckily for him, it was just enough to diminish the brunt of the sandstorm. And so there's a bunch of people reeling around, coughing and choking up sand. Everything is covered in dust, but underneath it all, everybody survived. There is no lasting damage done. So that obviously turned out quite well for them. Now, at this point, magistrates start to create a expedition over to the caravan because they are going to blame Teferi for the sandstorm. During the sandstorm, someone has gone into the city and said to the magistrates, Teferi's out there creating a sandstorm. Like, this is his doing. So the magistrates are on their way to basically take the whole caravan into custody for working with Teferi here. And that's when they realize that Quende, who was with them when they started, he's missing. He's gone. So Sabirah tells Teferi, you have to hide. You have to hide. Like, if the magistrates don't find you here, they might not be able to connect this to the caravan, and we may all be able to be good to go. But otherwise, like, you're worn out from what you did. Clearly, you need to hide somewhere, and we'll try and figure out what we're going to do here. So that's pretty big of Sabirah, in all honesty. Now, Quende, he ambushes Teferi at this point. Teferi departs trying to find somewhere to hide in the rocky crags. He hasn't even departed the caravan yet when all of a sudden there's a blade flashing towards him, and it's Quende coming at him with incredible speed. Quende is quite gifted when it comes to sword work. So he's coming at Teferi with multiple swords, and he starts to drive one of his swords down towards Teferi. Now, Teferi's mostly magically exhausted, but he has just enough magic to blast the sword with accelerated time magic. And what that did is rusted and weakened the blade to the point where when it hit Teferi's chest, the blade itself shattered. Now, Teferi's baffled. He's saying, Quende, why are you coming after me? What sort of problem do we have with each other? And Quende rages because he's descended from Mageda the Lion. And Mageda the Lion and all those people were lost when Zhalfir was phased out into whatever sort of pseudo-existence that it's now stuck in. So Quende doesn't accept Teferi says they're not gone. They're still there. If you go down by the edge of where Zhalfir was, you can actually see traces of it still. They're there. I just can't reach them. But Quende isn't willing to accept this because Quende has been raised his entire life to hate Teferi, to blame him for the loss of his people. Oh, like his hatred runs very, very deep. So Kwende reaches back to basically do a mighty swing down on Teferi, and a whip snaps around his wrist, Indiana Jones style. It's Sabirah. She showed up, and she grabs his arm and yanks it back. Kwende, what are you doing? Right? And Kwende says, I have to destroy Teferi. Teferi. I have no idea why I said it like that. So Sabirah, in a surprising move, actually drops her guard and steps in front and says, if you're going to strike him down, you'll have to strike me down. And Kwende can't bring himself to do it. In the end, he breaks down. He breaks down and he admits that he actually was the one responsible for what happened to MacLeod. Like, he's the one who did that. That essentially, it was all Kwende. MacLeod was a poor victim. Sabirah was disgusted by what Kwende had done. Kwende tried to say, oh, but this man was a criminal and a thief. And Sabirah says, it doesn't justify what you've done. You know? So at this point, the situation has been resolved. And Sabirah is packing up the caravan, getting ready to move on. And she invites Teferi to join up. You can totally come with me. I mean, really, it's the least you could do. You kind of owe me. And having a time mage with us could really protect the caravan. So Teferi agreed that for a time, he would accompany her. Now, that's completely understandable. You found somebody who knows who you actually are, accepts who you are, has stood up for you. She's already clearly decided she respects and cares about Teferi, or she wouldn't step in front of Kwende, right? So, based on that sort of mutual respect and appreciation they had for each other, they ended up a couple years later settling down in an unnamed town along the trade routes that the caravans traveled. And Sabirah, even though she was part of a nomadic people, she stayed put just long enough to give birth to her and Teferi's daughter, Niambi. And then Teferi settled into a comfortable life of raising his daughter while his wife went back to traveling with the caravans. And I think that's pretty nice. Thinking about all the stuff that Teferi has been through and thinking he just gets to spend some time as a family man, just raising his daughter in relative peace, and to have somebody who loves and cares for him after spending a bunch of time just reviling himself and also being reviled by the people around him. That is a nice story. I like it. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. I really do enjoy getting to talk about cards that have story attached to them. So thanks for spending time with me, my friends, and I will see you all very soon.